social, political, economical. For example, the IRGC, which is which is listed as a terrorist organization, really runs about a big chunk of the Iranian economy. So the government has so much control over every aspect of the life in Iran that sometimes it's very hard to breathe in Iran. And as we see, a lot of young activists end up in jail, or people because of just like to have a certain styles of hair, or maybe they like to hang out with their maybe friends, and sometimes they've been mistreated, sometimes been slashed in public. So the intimidation is quite wide, and then sometimes youth are afraid, and but still we see a lot of opposition to government policies in universities and in other areas. But unfortunately, because of Iran's defiance not only to international resolutions and calls, but also really Iran does not respect any of its population call to maybe changes in anything, and that has put a lot of pressure on the Iranian youth to collectively come out and really ask for greater change. People of Iran, and including the youth, have been quite cautious of what to do, because the previous revolution that they did, and most of it was done by the youth, and it cost them this, and then now that's what they have to deal with, and they're afraid that they might do something else, and it may even get worse. So they want to do something that for sure has to do with the removal of the current system, because within the current Islamic system, there's no room for minorities, there's no room for anyone that can practice their basic rights. And so the removal, in a sense that whether the regime is removed in a way that the totalitarian elements of the regime. Right now we have elections in Iran, but the elections are just mockery, as a lot of you know, because there's certain screening that needs to be done. So only the officials get elected, or people get elected who are actually screened and been actually selected by the government agencies. And this is, so what a lot of youth have been done is to strengthening that process, the electoral process, and making it democratic. But in Iran, and as if improved, in Iran, there's no room for such changes and such an improvement. So a lot of people actually lost hope in changes in the regime, and the regime wants to encourage people to come and to vote and to engage, but people have actually have tested the regime, and it's impossible. But the youth in general are quite energetic in Iran, are quite, as unlike a lot of other places in the Middle East, quite pro-Western in many ways, quite educated. They're quite exhausted, because really there's no future for them. There's no opportunities unless you are with the government. You're really, and that includes the Kurds and as well as everybody else. Unless you're with the government, really there's no room for you for employment, education, and many other sectors. And that's why a lot of youth have actually fled Iran, and as you see, a lot of migrants that have been relocated or actually gone to abroad to seek a better life and better living. But I think if anything that could be done in Iran, it has to be through the youth, and youth are the major player in bringing about any changes in Iran. And I think a lot of the activism that goes on right now in terms of exposing Iran's human rights conditions and violations is done by the youth, and we're grateful to them. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, just about out of time, Mr. Silva.
Just want to say that in relation to the elections, I think you're absolutely right. It's a sham elections, all approved by the Guardian Council and of course the Ayatollahs. The thing also that what has been noticed in the last elections is the fact that Iranians, by and large, are not voting. They are basically staying away from the process because they know the process to be a fraud. And so that's why it's such a high percentage of them do not participate. The other thing I wanted to mention is the fact that there are many other national minorities, such as the Azeris, the Turkmens, the Baluchis, in Iran, and whether there is any coordination between those different groups in the diasporas and also in Iran to see if can bring about some change.
Well, as I said, about more than half of the population in Iran belongs to those national minorities or ethnic minorities, and the government has been very successful in clamping down these activisms and oppositions within these minority groups or national groups, and they've been quite successful. So they stage, for example, in the early revolution, Iranian Kurdistan was a hotbed of Kurdish nationalism and as well as other Iranian nationalism or nationalities. But Iran was, the government in Iran was the Islamic regime in Iran was quite capable if on suppressing that movement. And they've done it, and then usually these movements have been suspected or at least being alleged of having ties with Canada, U.S., and we've seen that many times where they alleged of groups in Ahwaz, in Arab areas, in the Turkmen areas or Baluchi areas to having some sort of relations or connections to outside powers, especially the Europeans or North Americans. And but despite this, I mean, the government, the people of Iran have quite opened up their eyes to a lot of these conditions, and especially the people belonging to minorities. There's some sort of with the changes in the neighborhood, especially in Iraq, where we've seen where people, despite all the difficulties that are faced, despite all the violence that exists there, but there's at least some sort of political structure that's been set up there, that there are where people, Arabs, Kurds, Shiites, and Sunnis are able to come together in a parliament setting where they can discuss things. And yeah, there's debates, and there will be debates for sure. But there has given a lot of Iranian national minorities a lot of hope in terms of bring about similar changes. We don't want to go through the same violence, but definitely some sort of federal structure where minorities are accommodating culturally, politically, and economically. Maybe a Canadian example or other federal structures. It doesn't have to be a copy, but some sort of decentralizations will definitely help Iran. And fortunately, the Iranian national minorities have been able to come together, at least in diaspora, to create an organization that advocates federalism and decentralizations and democracy. And that organization is called Congress of Nationalities for Federal Iran. And this Congress, this coalition of opposition groups consists of about 15, 16 groups and associations and political parties that represents various ethnic minorities, and they've been quite successful in campaigning, not only educating the world outside that Iran needs some sort of a centralized structure that can accommodate everybody, but also educating the non-nationalities, non-ethnic minorities like Persians, who are very hesitant to try anything that gives ethnic minorities more power and more say in the central government and the everyday life of the country. So there's something that's been set up. Obviously, it's outside the country because there's really nothing that could be done in Iran with the current situation. But there's a lot of coordinations, and lately we had there's a lot of lobbying done in the U.S. and as well as in Europe and European Parliament. Last week or about 10 days ago, we had some sort of conference done in the European Parliament for federalism and democracy in Iran. This is things that the coalition is doing right now, is to lobby, at least to present some sort of alternative to the future of Iran in case changes happen. A lot of people outside Iran are hesitant to really touch or do anything because they say, well, there's no alternative. But people of Iran, especially the minorities, have come up with something themselves.
Thank you. We'll go to our next questioner, Madame Tilak, s'il vous plaît.
Bonjour. Ms. Tilak, please. Good afternoon. I'll give you time to put your headset on. Thank you for being here today. I'm going to have to leave a little bit before the end of the meeting because I have to speak in the House of Commons at 2 p.m. It's not out of a lack of interest, really, but because of other obligations here in Parliament. I'd like to start by saying that your presentation was really very interesting. It gave us, members of Parliament, an opportunity to learn a little bit more about the situation of Kurds in Iran. I would have to agree with what Mr. Silva said about the conference this week, and I would even go further and say that I find it's unnatural that countries would have to leave to boycott an event rather than ask for the expulsion of individuals who would carry such unacceptable, make those unacceptable comments. If every time the president of Iran decides to take advantage of a forum to make this type of diatribe, I don't think it is a service rendered to the Iranian people nor to democracy at the international level. You ended your presentation by saying that there were other measures that Canada could take in order to condemn or to impose sanctions on the Iranian government. Should these sanctions be commercial, economic, or diplomatic?
Thank you very much again. I think the current international pressure that's exerted on Iran is quite is working quite well, and we've seen in Iran right now that a lot of the agencies that are affiliated to the Iranian government and the different elements in Iran that are working towards building a nuclear bomb, and as well as other organizations like especially the military sides, the IRGC with the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, who are working to very hard and through various mediums to work toward the end ultimate goal, which is really building a nuclear bomb, and that's what we think Iran is headed for, is in the right direction. I think the international community, and including Canada, has done a lot, not only in terms of condemning the human rights violation in Iran, which is a priority and it's to be done and needs to be continued through various bodies, including the Canadian Parliament, but also really trying to take measures to make sure that these resolutions are respected and they're actually put into action. For example, as you mentioned, on the diplomatic side, there are a lot of Iranian individuals who are traveling freely, and despite being on the terrorist list and despite being on the list of many organizations that have actually been sanctioned. And I think diplomatically, it's hard to maybe sanction someone like President, who's so-called President of Iran, for a conference, but it's possible to prevent someone like Murtazavi, who is personally has killed Zahra Kazemi in Evin presence, to be able to be present in an human rights gathering that was done in Geneva sometimes back. And so Canada can pressure and maybe file legal complaints, whether through various international courts, to really go after these individuals who are explicit human rights violators. And for many years, Canada has been used as a bridge to influence the U.S. and by Iran, and Iran has used Canada as a market to infiltrate into the U.S. market in many ways. And just a few days ago, we saw that an Iranian Canadian was supposedly and working for the Iranian government and buying some uranium equipment coming through the Canadian borders and headed to Middle East and ultimately Iran. And I think Canada needs to be more careful in terms, especially screening individuals who are coming from Iran, especially officials affiliated with different organizations. So yes, that's the diplomatic side, and Canada also could sanction, maybe look into more Iranian businesses in Canada and finding out what businesses are in Canada that are affiliated to the Iranian government and what agencies are there part of. There are rumors that maybe there are a lot of construction companies, that road building companies, telecom companies that have a lot of Iranian investments, and especially from the Iranian officials, that Canada could target easily from here without really going anywhere else. And I think at the economic sanctions, Canada could also do that, and diplomatically, and again by continuing to expose